Hey guys, I'm Adam, this is Brennan, and today we're going to talk about small Buhurt fighting and what to do on the list as a smaller fighter when you go to fight. And grapple on the list. When we're talking about small fighters, we're talking about anyone who's probably, honestly, 5'10" or below. Ideally, I'm going to be talking about lighter situations. I'm 175 pounds, or I think that's 75 kilos, and Brennan, you're
5'11" and I'm 245 pounds.
yeah. Brennan's not the tallest person, but he is very strong. So he has a good perspective on some of these situations, because we even get into certain situations where you might fight someone who's like 6'3", 6'5", and they're exceptionally hard to grapple just because they're tall.
Yeah.
So some of the things we're going to talk about are pretty relevant. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the hazards of grappling someone who is A, heavier than you, and B, taller than you. The first part is that it's really easy for them to burden their weight on you if you let them get close. So say imagine a situation where Brennan's like 6'3", 6'4". My shoulders would be normally much below his shoulders, and they can just put their weight on you, right? It's hard on your neck, it's hard on your shoulders, it's hard on your knees and your ankles, like all your joints, right? So the very first thing is you want to not let them do that. So we almost never want to get in this situation. We'll cover what to do when you do get here, but for the most part, we don't get there. So how do we mitigate that? The first thing is we're going to talk about range control, and range control is just not letting it get someone close, right? If someone is close enough when they get both their hands around your head, you're too close. At least if you're not doing that intentionally, right? So the first thing you're going to use is your feet, right? I'm just not going to stand close to them. I'm going to stand about hand's reach, where my hand can be between me and my opponent. This is pretty safe, right? I can manipulate their hand, I can stop them from coming forward, I can kick them or strike them to stop them from moving forward and advancing on me. It's not super complicated, you just back up more. So when they attack you, I just back up. Obviously you don't want to back up too far and collapse your line of scrimmage. The second thing, the most important thing, is we're going to talk about hand fighting. We're going to talk about a couple different ranges here and what you really do with that. So hand fighting is, I'm just going to not let my opponent attack me, and the goal here is I want the inside, usually, I want the inside, and I want to deny my opponent from getting to the inside of my body, right? If Brennan's trying to take two hands around my head, right? I've given up the inside of my body, and my hand's on the outside. This is super bad for me. So you can do a couple hand fighting drills. They're on the app you can find later. And it's literally just, my opponent goes attack my inside, I'm just swimming and parrying their hands out, and I'm constantly doing this, right? This also works for when you're moving around and someone's trying to chase and grab you, and I'm just parrying their hands out of the way, right? I didn't want them to grab me ever, and that's my first line of defense into not letting someone grab me. It's just stopping their hands from doing what they want. Hand fighting works at every single range of the engagement, and it's super important that you use it all the time, right? In wrestling, we have swimming, and it's when I'm just swimming my hands in or out to change grips. If Brennan and I are closer to each other, like we're like this, maybe I'm going to swim to where I want my hand to go like this and break this frame, right? Or if he has inside control here and my hand's on the outside, I'm going to do something where maybe I do this and break, or maybe I'll do this and break and get my own grips. But I'm constantly just trying to control the inside of my body and not let them grab me. The third thing is framing, and we'll talk about the first ranges of framing. Framing is kind of like a part of hand fighting, but it's more committed, because I can hand fight with my opponent. We're not actually committed to touching each other. But framing, I'm going to physically put my hand on parts of their body, like I'm going to put my bones on their bones. So I have my forearm here on their forearm, and I'm framing off of this forearm, right? Now there's actual structure between us, and this is how I start preventing my opponent from attacking me. So A range, I kind of consider my forearm and his forearm, or my forearm on his bicep or his shoulder. So this is like kind of like, I'll say the bicep. So here, and I'm going to stop his advance. It's really hard for if I'm leaning into the rail and I have a frame here, it's hard for them to grab me. Same thing if they get to reach for my head and I do this. Now I have frames on his arms and I can defend myself easier. It's much harder when I don't do that. I'm like trying to stop him with my hands. I'm like, oh God, he's killing me, right? But I've actually just put my bones on them. It's much harder. So I kind of consider that A range as far as framing. B range, we have shoulders. So say we got closer into a traditional collar tie, where we're like this. I have my elbow on his shoulder, or my elbow in his armpit, something like this, to where we're a little bit closer, like maybe your opponent moved your hands out of the way, and they just got a little bit closer on you, Okay, well, my second line of defense is my elbow essentially, and I'm putting my elbow on their torso and stopping them from coming forward. This is a really nice frame. I like using this because it lets me get a little bit close to my opponent. Maybe it has them do some certain things, but it still stifles them and stops them from coming forward. The third type of framing is framing off their hip or blocking their hip. And I can kind of do that at B range too, where maybe I'm here with this frame and I can frame with my knee onto their hip and stop their hips from coming forward. Because sometimes, like especially they're trying to do a Soto or they're trying to really get control of you, they really want their hips close to you and maybe like they can adjust your body. Now he's gonna start attacking you with his hips, right? So I want to stop his hips from coming forward. The first one is with a knee frame where I'm doing this. Or say I get in a really bad situation, I get a guillotine or a headlock or something. I'm gonna frame my elbow on his hip like this, and then I'm gonna start fighting this hand. But I have to stop his hips from coming forward, because if his hips come forward, like you can just sink his weight in, or put your hips in, like you're trying to finish me through the rail. He can push me through the rail, and I'm kind of done. So I really need to stop his hips at this point and stop him from coming forward, and then I need to move around and try to get out of the situation. But if I don't frame on his hips, I'm gonna die. It's very uncomfortable and it's gonna be really easy to lose.
And the basic tenet of framing and why it matters is that all throws and all takedowns work best the less space there is. So you have to take all the space out of your opponent and yourself in order to get to a position to efficiently finish a takedown. And framing ensures that there's space. You always have somewhere to go.
Yeah, and I like framing specifically. Everyone uses framing, everyone should because it's powerful. But even as a smaller fighter, you need to know that maybe you're not the strongest person, maybe you don't have the same reach as someone, but your bones are essentially as strong as your opponent. They're certainly much more stronger than your muscles are. Like, my arm can be forced back into position, say if I have a hand axe in my hand and Brendan like forces my hand behind my body, right? You can stop that, it's just super hard, but if I put my forearm on him like this, my forearm's not going anywhere, right? So you need to use the structure of your body to actually stop their advances from their attacks.
It's also just more efficient in terms of energy consumption, right? So my actual favorite way to frame, and it's an extreme range, is I just like to pull my arm in their head, and I'm just locking my arm out. But people will try and push through this, and him pushing through this requires him to make an effort. It requires me to do dick. I'm not expending energy, and all frames work like this to some extent. The person trying to push is burning a lot of energy. The person receiving is essentially just resting.
Yeah, and if you're good at hand fighting and you're doing good at framing, it's just hard for your opponent to beat your defense. Especially if they're not very good at hand fighting, you just put your hand on their head and they're like trying to fight your hand off, and maybe they fight it off and you just put it back or whatever. But that's just the very basics of hand fighting and framing for being a smaller person.